officers absent, Rich Morgan, Art Riley, and Adele Flicker. We have two guests tonight who are running for the State Assembly, 8th District, right? Which covers, could you tell us the...
all of Smithtown and the Hauppauge portion of Iceland.
And I told them each that this is a very informal kind of meet the candidates. Each get 5 or 10 minutes to introduce themselves, tell you anything they'd like, and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience. And each of them will, you can direct it to one candidate, you can direct it to both candidates, and each of them will have a chance to respond. Any questions? Okay. Mr. Fitzpatrick, who is the incumbent, and Mr. Zove, come on up.
If you don't grow tomatoes to throw at anybody, you don't like.
That's not a good sign.
Have a seat. And whoever would like to go first, you can flip a coin, you can rock, paper, scissors.
She got the challenge.
First of all, I just want to thank Bruce and the Commack Community Association for allowing me the opportunity to be here tonight, and to my gracious opponent who we've interacted in different forums in the past, and I thank him for sitting with me and talking about the issues. Because that's what really this campaign is all about. It's about talking about the issues that are going on in this community. It's talking about what I hope to bring to the district if I'm elected to be your Community Assembly District. And I'll start with that. You know, I grew up in Commack. I've lived here my entire life. My family's lived here for over 50 years. Both my parents graduated from Commack schools. And I'm proud that I was able to graduate too and be able to grow up here. But that's a challenge that I think a lot of people are facing. Not just the young people, but also the working class and also the seniors who are on a fixed income budget. And that's one of the things that I want to tackle first is whatever tax dollars that you are, that money should be going back into your community. And I will work every day to make sure that your tax dollars come back home. Some of the issues that we have come across while walking the streets and knocking on doors has a lot to do about life in the home. It's, about your tax dollars and how they're being spent and where government has gone wrong. And I worked in the Suffolk County Legislature for the last 4 years. I left my job there so I could work and care about our community 100% during this campaign. I think that shows my commitment to this community, to the Commack community, to the Assembly District, and really to all of Long Island. Because there are challenges here that we're facing. We're the highest tax state in the country, and I think that there's a lot of work that has to be done. I think there's a lot of shortfalls that the government has met, or that they have failed to meet, rather. And I think I'm up for the challenge. Talking about infrastructure, talking about, bringing back aid and bringing back, tax relief to you as the homeowner, and really just restoring our quality of life to a place that's great to settle down and raise a family. That's what my parents had set for myself, and it's something that I would like to do. I'd like to be able to pass that down to my children and hopefully have them graduate from our schools, because I think that's why a lot of people have come to Commack. It's for the good school district, it's for the community. We do have our fair share of problems, but in the grand scheme, I'm proud to call it home. Some of the problems that I see is the heroin epidemic that's really troubling a lot of our neighborhoods. The New York State Legislature passed some great legislation this year, but as far as we're concerned, it didn't go far enough. And I think to an extent my opponent would certainly agree with that. Some of the other issues we have are obviously keeping the young people here, but it's also the working class, it's the seniors, like I said, who are on a fixed income budget. And the conversation that I have had at every single door isn't just about your tax dollars, but it's also about your electric costs. And it's driving people away, it's driving the business community away. And I think that it's going to be a very big, important issue, no matter who is elected to this district come January. I think it's something that the state legislature is going to have to face, and I know that I'm up for the challenge. So I'm proud to be running. I'll be even prouder to be serving, hopefully as your assemblyman. Election day is November 4th. And, you know, today's a perfect day because today's, you know, National Register to Vote Day, which I think is really important because, of course, I'd love you to vote for me, but what's really important is that you just get out and vote, and that the young people are getting out and voting. If you have young children or grandchildren who are living at home, please encourage them to come out to vote. Turnout's going to be very important this year. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Fitzpatrick. I have the pleasure and honor of serving all of you as you are a member of the Assembly, formerly in the 7th District, now in the 8th District for the next decade. And I am running for my 7th term. Prior to serving in the State Assembly, I served the town of Smithtown for 15 years on the town council. I also work in the private sector as a registered associate with Morgan Stanley, and I do pension work. That is my specialty. I have 2 children, Karina, 31, who is expecting our first grandchild on or about November 1, and we're happy about that, and a son, Michael, not a junior, he's Michael, different middle name, who is 26 years old, I think the same age as Jason, lives in Brooklyn, and my daughter works for Ernst & Young. My son is the sales representative in the city for Dale Cellars, I think the finest winery on the North Fork of Long Island. Elections are always very important. Everyone likes to say this is the most important election we've ever faced. Well, every election is the most important election we have. I have had, as I said, the privilege of serving for the past 6 terms. We have some very important issues that we are grappling with in New York State. As Jason mentioned, we are 50th in business climate in New York State, in the country. We also have the highest combined tax burden of all 50 states. That doesn't help your business climate. And I have dedicated my tenure in the State Assembly to fighting for fiscal responsibility and fiscal sanity. My experience in the financial services industry gives me, I believe, some insight into some of the cost drivers. We need to address those structural cost drivers that are threatening our municipalities, our school districts, and the state itself. I look forward to your questions to get into more of the details, but we do have a bright future in New York State if we make the necessary adjustments and changes to many laws on the books to make or to bring back prosperity in New York State. On my computer in my office, I have a little quote from Aristotle, of all people, and it says, "Even when laws have been written down, they ought not always remain unaltered." And in New York State, there's a tendency to not want to change anything. But ladies and gentlemen, each day or each month when you open that tax bill or you get your bills, you know we have some serious problems to deal with. Whether it's your electric bill, whether it's your property tax bill, there are reasons why these taxes are growing at the rate they are growing. And we need to change it. And I look forward to our discussion and our debate to get into deeper detail as to what I would like to see happen and what I have proposed to address these issues and the others. I just want to close by saying, you know, I grew up in Hauppauge. I live in St. James, and I learned in school that a vowel before a double consonant always has the soft sound. So I always say Commack. That's how I grew up, not Commack. So, but I have been told the original spelling was C-O-M-A-C, which would be Commack, but it is spelled C-O-M-M-A-C-K. So I like to say Commack. So I just always find that amusing. But thank you for doing this, Bruce and the CCA. You're a wonderful organization, and this is what makes public service, I think, so exhilarating, is having this exchange, having a debate, a discussion, and I hope you'll consider me, I hope you'll vote for me on November 4th election day. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm sure that everyone has some questions to our candidates. Anyone like to begin? Rachel?
There was a bill proposed about changing the days for voting for primary and general elections to include Saturday and Sunday. This bill apparently has died in committee because there was no assembly.
No assembly sponsor. Who is the Senate sponsor?
It was Avella, Senator Avella of Bayside.
Avella, Tony Avella.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And I was told that at Flanagan's office that if we want this bill to be light, that we need someone in the assembly to
Yeah.
co-sponsor it.
Yeah.
Do you see any benefit in getting the
Well,
dates changed?
it's an interesting question, and the answer is okay. It kind of falls into this category of early voting. There are people who believe we should have early voting, like they have in other states. There's some interesting politics behind that. And I don't need to discuss that here unless we want to, because there are different points of view from both sides of the aisle. But there's also a cost issue to early voting. And that's a serious issue because we have a board of elections. And in order to keep voting places open, where would you do that? Would it be in a library? Would it be in a firehouse? Would it be, you have to have locations. 2, you have to have people staff those locations. Are you going to have voting from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. for those 2 days or for a 2-week period as they have in some states? Everything costs money. And right now in New York State, I don't think there is a single county, certainly not Nassau or Suffolk, that has the budget or the free cash flow to pay for that additional expense. Now, what we do in New York State to kind of compensate for the fact that we don't have early voting, and I'm not a fan of early voting, but a lot of people utilize the absentee ballot and use that as an early voting vehicle. That's widely used, and in fact, it was one of the reasons Congressman Bishop did very well, because his campaign was very effective at getting those absentee ballots out. You always, whenever a kid goes to college, you make sure they sign up for an absentee ballot so they can vote from school. If they want to vote in the community they go to school in New York State, you can do that too. But the absentee ballot, you're supposed to either be ill, or away on business, or whatever other reason, vacation. Nobody really follows that. If somebody wants to vote absentee, generally speaking, nobody gives them a hard time in the elections. You want to vote absentee? Fine. Here's the application. We'll send it to you. You can pick it up. Vote absentee. It's very popular with seniors, by the way. So we kind of compensate for, that additional cost is very real. So what the boards of elections basically do is we have kind of relaxed our enforcement, if you will, of absentee ballots. So absentee ballots, if you want to vote early, get an absentee ballot, and you can do it that way. And it saves the taxpayers the cost of staffing and paying the rent for those locations for however many days you want to have that early voting period.
And do they count those absentee ballots by election day?
You have 7 days to get your absentee ballot in after election day. It has to be postmarked by election day. And you have at least 7 days, a full week, to get it in to arrive.
But they pull the election on Tuesday night.
Well, the number of absentee ballots is very small, but occasionally, and I think anybody who follows the news, occasionally you do get a race that's very, very close, and the election is not certified until it's 8 days after election day. The machines are recanvassed, they're recounted, and the absentee ballots are counted as well. They're counted the night of the election, and they'll be reviewed as well, and then it's certified. The election is then certified. Somebody wins, somebody loses.
If I can just make a couple of points on this issue, and something that Mr. Fitzpatrick talked about with absentee ballots, especially close races. I've been involved in a couple of primary races as an aide or an advisor to somebody, and I can tell you that on election night we went to bed and we were losing by 2, and we wake up a couple of days later. Those absentee ballots, the affidavits are counted, and then all of a sudden we won by 1 or 2 votes. And that ability has, that has the ability of swinging the outcome of the election. I would actually, and I do appreciate his commitment to fiscal responsibility on that issue, I would support early voting. I think there's ways that we can go about it where we kind of contain it. We don't make it, not sure we're opening up and opening staff to tens and hundreds of people. But also one of the points that I want to make is, you bring up a point about the bill not having a sponsor in the assembly. And, that's one of the ways, in the assembly, the way it's currently crafted is we have, it's like a majority group. So, there are people who have been in the minority caucus who have been able to push bills before the floor. They can find supporters and sponsors from the majority who can carry their bill. And that's something that I think that I can offer to the district is to, if I'm elected, I would be a part of the majority. And hopefully be able to take an idea, whether it comes from a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. If it's a good bill for everybody, it's a good bill. And I think that I can have a little bit more push and a little bit more oomph to get something like that, into the hands of both majority leaders and to the governor.
I could just make one more thing. We are the third largest state in the country, soon to be overtaken by Florida as the fourth largest, but we are a diverse state. We have a high concentration of population in the southern part of the state, and we have a very light population upstate. When you propose a bill like this is for all of New York State. So the problem with early voting, you will hear this from the upstate counties. Again, what locations will you use? How many days will you keep it open? How much will it cost to staff it? But also the convenience factor for upstate voters. It's a long ride to get to the post office, to get to the supermarket for some of these people. So it's a more costly effort for some of our upstate counties than it would be for, say, Nassau, Suffolk, or Westchester. So cost is a factor here. And again, we're 50 sovereign states. Some states allow early voting. Okay, sometimes there are problems with early voting, voter fraud, things like that. That's a very real issue, even though it doesn't get widely reported. But New York State compensates for that lack of early voting by being more accommodative in the absentee ballot process.
Deb?
This on the same issue, rather than it costing so much money, and if elections are so important, which it is to us, and we know what happened in Scotland, that 86% of the people voted. A day off for people to vote is very significant, and I think that would be an alternative to your cost for those people who could go and I'm sure in the Assembly and the Senate there are more options than just having polls open for free. And this is another one. Giving a day off for something as sacred as voting. I'm wondering if that would change the numbers we get.
Interesting question. No, I think you would get some resistance from mandating a day off to vote. The polls open at 6 a.m. and they close at 9 p.m. For most people, that's more than adequate. There's nothing wrong with making an effort to get out to vote. Maybe getting up a little bit early. My wife and I like to go early in the morning before I go into the office. Or, it's open until 9 o'clock. Maybe if you want to keep it open, maybe until 10 o'clock, or maybe even 11 o'clock. I would prefer to do that than mandate on employers a day off. Because it takes how much time to vote, and then you have the day off. I guess that's good for the retailers. They'd like that because maybe you go to the mall or something like that. But to give a Tuesday off, I think you would run into real resistance. We can accommodate people in other ways. Some states do mail-in ballots. Who knows, maybe someday we can do it online, perhaps, in a secure way. I think technology is going to change. It's changing the way we do a lot of things. That's one way to do it. But mandating a day off, I think you're going to run into some real resistance, and I would not look favorably upon that. I think there's ample time in the day for people to make the effort to go vote.
But there are people who are working, and I know you know some of them.
But that's what the absentee ballot is for.
But you know what? Children, soccer, 2 hours each way, perhaps by train, just to get a parking spot. Where do people in Commack go? Go to Deer Park, that's overcrowded, there's no parking there. in Huntington, they're not allowed to park. They're traveling to Jersey, they're traveling all over. Just a comment on that.
I see what you're saying, but if you look at an absentee ballot application, all of those issues are covered if you would like the convenience of voting via absentee.
Any-
Let's say veterans or.
Okay, I just wanted to see if any other questions. Why don't you tell everyone who you are?
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Powell, I'm here in
Thanks.
Commack. My question is, are either one of you concerned with the PSNG's new program, starting the 2.0 program in January, where they want to put radio frequency and then convert them eventually over smart meters on homes with no string attached, opt-outs out in New York yet? We have no opt-out, and if you use the word opt-out, they could put a fee on that, which is not yet determined with State National Grid. I opted not to get a radio frequency meter on my home. They've sent me a letter saying that they're working on my opt-out fee. They don't even have one yet. Most states like Connecticut have a no strings attached opt-out. If you don't want the radio frequency meter, you don't have to get one. If you don't want a smart meter on your home to be spied on, you don't have to get one. So how do you feel about that?
Well, for me personally, I agree with you. I think that, any time that we can be giving people an option is the way that we should be going. I actually am pushing for a plan introduced by a Republican in the Assembly, and what it basically does is it takes PSE&G away from being the monopoly that we have here on Long Island, and we look at attracting other small municipal electric companies that can, bring us competition, make it a little bit more free market, and give you access to cheaper power. So I think that, it's definitely something that I would sit down immediately, take a look at, and if the residents came to me, said this is a concern that we all have, then we should definitely be looking at it, and you shouldn't be locked into one set thing. And especially if there's a fee that's going to be attached, that's just wrong.
There's only been one health study done on these meters, and it's by the company who sold them to PSE&G. So there's not even a health study to determine if this is a constant microwave pulse going in your house.
I do not like the idea of that at all. It's an erosion of our freedom as consumers, as citizens, as Americans. New York State is a very consumer-friendly state, and I can envision strong support for legislation to create an opt-out, a cost-free opt-out like that, and I would certainly support an effort like that. When we get back in January, we will see PSE&G. Our electric service has been controversial for a long, long time, going back to the Long Island Lighting Company. Lilco, in and of itself, was not the enemy. The problem was Lilco was a monopoly, and all monopolies are bad. Legislation was passed back in the early 80s under Governor Mario Cuomo to create the Long Island Power Authority, make it a public entity. The reason for that is the Power Authority could float or issue tax-free municipal bonds to pay off that Shoreham debt, lowering the cost to ratepayers. But one of the problems that they ran into is one, you had dual use or dual fuel plants using oil and natural gas. They now run almost exclusively now, I believe, on natural gas, a much cleaner fuel. Oil was very expensive back then. And two, since Lilco was a private entity, all of its locations were taxed for the school districts. So in order to get the support to pass this, LIPA had to pay taxes on its plants and facilities because the school districts would have suffered a tremendous decrease in revenue. Not all of them, but those that had Lilco facilities. So that had to be accommodated. No other authority pays property tax, but LIPA does. So the combination of the high cost of fuel, the taxes, the $7 billion of debt is why we pay the highest cost per kilowatt hour, one of the highest costs. I think Con Edison is a little higher than we are. Now, we have tried to get, Assemblyman Al Graff from the town of Islip has been leading the effort to shake loose some of the nuclear power from the Fitzpatrick nuclear plant, no relation by the way, up in upstate New York along the St. Lawrence. Senator George Maziarz, who's the chair of Senate Energy, over his dead body will downstate get any of that energy. they will port that exclusively to lower electric rates for their consumers and their businesses. So we have, through LIPA, PSE&G operates the system. LIPA now manages the debt that remains. That's how the system works now. I think they are a good operator. They're out of New Jersey. They're good at what they do. But this is an effort. It's not just PSE&G. This is an effort to get control of these costs by taking your ability to control your own comfort level in your home and either raising that temperature because they think they know better, know what's better for you than you know what's good for you. I disagree with that strongly, and I think I won't go out on a limb, but I feel very strongly that there would be broad support to put in a cost-free option, opt-out.
You do realize they just recently, National Grid just blanketed the area, Commack, and put in RF meters on everybody's homes.
Most people don't even know they have it right now. Your gas meter, 99% of the people, 17 people opted out in Commack. 17 and all Commack.
Right.
Everyone else had it, they didn't even know. They went in on your property, they changed it.
You're right, it's true.
Okay.
So you
don't
have a
gas
radio
where I am.
frequency meter. What's going to happen is that radio frequency meter for your gas is going to talk to your electrical meter, and they are going to send waves to each other. Every 30 minutes, you're going to have 3 seconds of a microwave pulse. If you have a pacemaker, like you do at an airport, you have to go to a separate terminal. If your child has braces, these are all metal conductors that you're going to be absorbing. It is military-grade microwave. It's on their own website. Those are microwave pulses. In Michigan, 1 million people had it put on. So far, 70,000 have had it taken off. That's what I'm afraid of. They're going to come in January when this 2.0 program starts. Nobody's even aware of it, and they're just going to change everyone's meter, like they did, and they're going to probably do it in 3 weeks, the entire Commack. They're bringing people from upstate New York, and they're going to come in and blanket it before anyone gets the word out.
And there's no awareness of this.
There's none.
No.
I thought somebody did come from the electric.
I would demand that they take it off your house.
I am. I thought they came because we got a generator, and it was just something new that had to. I said to Joe, they came today, and he didn't explain anything. Just went down and
They
said,
tell
it
consumers
was,
it'll make it cheaper.
but it was done in a matter of seconds.
Yes, I did the whole neighborhood in seconds.
Yeah.
Can you just put tin foil over it?
No, it can't, because it's such a heavy grade of pulse.
It'll melt
You
the
would
tin
actually,
foil?
there are shields you can buy. They're very expensive. It's about the size of this with this board here. You can put it against the wall on the where it's on the outside of the house. You can put this on the inside of your house, and then you can cover it with something. And there's also paint that would be reflected. And years ago, we used to have a little, the stuff you put the insulation in your wall. Part of it would have silver. They don't do that anymore because they knew that Wi-Fi was coming out and these meters were coming out, so they banned it years ago. That's why they stopped making the foil on the back of that.
Anybody sell control for that meter?
Well, they
Send your own
also,
pulse.
they've shown that they can be hacked. You can hack them.
Of course.
And I got a $513 water bill yesterday, and Channel 12 News was saying how they're concerned. They had hundreds of people talking about how their water bill is really high because they started this water meter. I didn't even know I had a radio frequency water meter. I didn't even know they put it on. So I went from not like maybe around $200 water bill to $513, and I'm thinking maybe something happened with this meter too. It can't be that accurate. So.
Any other questions?
I would recommend, Bruce, you get the PSE&G people to speak to the
We will. We will. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Who? Reverend? Hi.
You may have read in Newsday and other sources that my congregation was considering a program to shelter immigrant children that proved to be highly controversial, and we withdrew it. But I learned from the fire marshal, or the fire chief in Commack a couple of days ago that people approached him concerning this, and they said, we don't think that you'll be able to provide fire protection if if the congregation houses 40 children in transit. And they asked his professional opinion. And his opinion was, yes, he could provide all the fire protection that we would need, which sort of matched what the engineers who were looking in our building were telling us. But he said, my biggest problem is not that, it's heroin overdose by teens in Commack. And I'm scratching my head saying, wait a minute, these teens, at least the ones I see, seem to have every material blessing that the country offers, and they're turning to heroin. Why is that? You know, theologically, I have some thoughts about that, but I'm wondering, from your perspective, why do we have this situation? What would you be able to do about it in your office in the future?
About
Heroin.
the children or the heroin?
The heroin problem among teens in Commack seems to be higher than it's ever been. 144 died, I believe, in both counties last year, which is a record.
Right. It is, I'm sorry, it is a very interesting issue. This morning I was at Long Island Families Together, an umbrella group in Melville Marriott, where some very touching and moving stories were told by parents whose children are suffering through this epidemic. A year or so ago, the legislature passed the I-Stop program after the tragic killings over in Medford, where that individual killed people. He and his girlfriend and wife staged that robbery and killed those 4 people. The I-Stop program was designed to stop doctor shopping. In fact, on News 12 tonight, a doctor was just arrested for overprescribing these opiate painkillers and selling them out on the market. We've passed legislation to provide coverage, insurance coverage for treatment. That's an interesting issue because I was one of the last people to sign on to that bill, not because I didn't support the effort, but I have very serious questions about how much is this going to cost. I believe I have a fiduciary responsibility, and before I sign my name onto a bill to pass it, I'd like to get at least some information on how much this is going to cost. And that information never came. Now that's very unusual that something like that is not at least estimated to cost something. No one was putting that out. And the reason I asked those questions and took my time to sign on to that bill, which I ultimately signed on to and voted for, was Timothy's Law. And that was the mental health parity law that was passed a few years ago. And strong lobbying effort, very sad story about someone's child, Timothy, who hung himself for lack of services for him, not covered by insurance. The last state to pass legislation covering mental health parity was the state of Maryland before New York did. I called the state of Maryland to find out how much does this cost. I called the health department and spoke to the people down there because, again, the proponents were saying it's going to cost only $1.26 per person per month. That was the estimated cost. And one thing you learn very quickly in Albany is that you shouldn't trust anyone's numbers. Don't take anyone's numbers as gospel, because it doesn't matter which side of the issue you're talking about, people want to lobby you and get you to their side. And sometimes they use those numbers to their advantage. So it's incumbent upon me, the member, acting as a fiduciary for the people I represent, to ask those questions. So I called Maryland, and the lady told me, she said, mental health parity has now become the second fastest growing component of our health plan. So it's become expensive. And one of the problems you have when you cover something by insurance, you've now created a revenue stream for the providers, all right, who are in business, not just to provide service, but also to make money. So you have to be very careful. How is this going to be managed? And Timothy's Law was going to be managed using the managed care model. Now, everybody hates the managed care model for their regular health insurance, but this is what they're going to use to manage the cost of Timothy's Law. So On the heroin issue, I want to know, can anybody tell me? I asked the sponsor's office. I called our budget people. Can anybody give me? I asked the advocates themselves, some of whom live here in Smithtown who lost children. Can anybody just please give me some information so I have an idea of what the estimated cost of this new coverage is going to be? And no one could give me an answer. So I took a leap of faith because I do believe the problem is serious enough that this treatment has to occur. For many years I worked with Elena Economopoulos, who runs our Horizons Counseling Center, and was with her just last night at a meeting. The town provides excellent service in that regard. If you've never seen Horizons, go down and take a look. The schools are trying their very best. But I think one of the problems, Reverend, we have a cultural problem. I think we have, quite frankly, when you turn on the TV and you look at what our young people are exposed to today in our culture, it makes me very sad and it makes me very upset. I have a grandchild that's coming. I shudder to think what my daughter and son-in-law are going to go through to raise this child and this culture we have. I think our culture drives a lot of this. I would love to see a lot of our elected officials who enjoy the contributions from Hollywood, like our governor, to put real pressure on them to clean up their act and stop producing the garbage that our kids are exposed to, because that's where they're getting this from. And if that makes me an old-fashioned conservative, so be it. But our culture, the lack of faith, there was an article, I think, in Newsday today, how more Americans, it was in the Wall Street Journal, for sure, that more Americans in a poll done by Pew Research, a recognized and respected polling organization, more people believe we should bring religion back into public life. That's a debate for another time in place. But our problem here with this drug, in my opinion, begins with the family. We have a problem with the family. In a lot of families, unfortunately, broken homes. And I think a big problem is the culture. And I think we need to get back, to asking God for a little bit of help, no matter what your faith is. Whether you're Jewish, whether you're Catholic, whether you're Lutheran, or whatever. But I think, bringing that back into our lives, I think would be, helpful.
Jason, if I may just make a couple of points. In terms of the heroin epidemic, one of the things that we've seen is that it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to get access to it. We've had a couple of scenarios over the last couple of years where we had Operation Heroin Highway up and down the Long Island Expressway, and about 100 people were, arrested, and, close between 40 and 50% of them came out of the town of Smithtown. We just had a recent bust within the last 2 or 3 months where, 2 people were arrested and dealing with 20 buyers a day, and again, it plagued the Smithtown community. I've talked to a couple of the families of a community group in our district in Kings Park in the know. And these are made up of families who have lost a child while waiting for the health insurance companies to pick up the premium. And that legislation that they passed at the end of the session was a good start, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. One of the other ways where I think we need to look in terms of how we're going to combat this problem is, we have an officer in the back, but in the 4th precinct, I can count on one hand how many narcotics officers we have. And this is a challenge that is not just in the town of Smithtown, but it plagues all of Long Island. It's something that we have to look to having more professionals dealing with. It's also about going in and putting in education into our schools about not just something like the DARE program, but really having the subject matter experts coming in, working with the children, working with the families. In a span of 5 weeks, earlier in the campaign, one of my aides lost 4 friends to heroin overdose in a 5-week period. It had a lot to do with the summertime, but it's just not acceptable. I've knocked on doors, and I was in a community of the district where the taxes are $30,000 to $50,000 a year, and they pay village tax. And I knocked on a woman's door, Republican, and I said to her, "What is the biggest issue that you have going on in this community?" She looked at me and she says, "Mr. Zuff, I have an 18-year-old daughter that just graduated high school, and I know she is socializing with people that are doing drugs, and she doesn't know how to help her." And that's a serious, serious problem that we have in this community, folks. In terms of in terms of the opiates, in terms of, all the drugs, there are people that need our help. And it's something that, I'm going to work on every single day, no matter what the election is, how the results go, because I don't want to lose another friend to the heroin. I don't, and it's not just heroin anymore. There are prescription pills, and there's, different types of, things that people are getting access to, and it's happening at an earlier age. And, I think that the families in our district that have lost a child have suffered already enough. And so any other legislation that this legislature can pass, it should be for them.
Just before you ask a question.
I would one day like to come here and do a presentation on this whole topic.
Oh, good.
I've been studying prescription drugs and the heroin problem in our communities. It's not just coming for 17 years now. And I gotta be honest with you, one of the things that I'm even learning is that the pharmaceutical companies since 1996 have been spending $30 million to white Caucasians to say that opiates are not addictive. And they lied to the federal government, they lied to the physicians, they lied to our doctors, and they lied to everyone. And they actually came out, I believe it was a pharmaceutical company called Purdue Farm, said, and this was the article that they had from the, this was the paragraph of saying that opiates was not addictive. The risk of addiction is much less than 1%. What happens is people don't realize when you go to it, and these doctors were brainwashed. They were told that these prescription pills, these oxycodines, these Vicodins, these Percocets, these Oxycontin were not addictive. So you, as a doctor, how dare you not give it to your patient who's in pain? So what happens? These pills, I can tell you, is a molecule difference of heroin. These pills that everyone is taking is a heroin pill. Now, call a spade a spade. They are a heroin pill. So the idea is we become addicted to them when we no longer can afford it, and now because of these programs, our doctors can no longer give it to you. I can buy a bag of heroin. I can buy 2 bags of heroin for what it cost me for a pack of cigarettes. $10 for 2 bags of heroin.
We have had...
Supply and demand, that's what it comes down to. I would do a whole program for you. I just came back from another seminar they're called Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing, PROP, and it really is coming out now what the dangers are and how we were all set up on this.
Well, the U.S. has had a war on drugs for the last 40 years. We've spent billions upon billions of dollars, and it's gotten worse.
That's illegal drugs that we have.
I understand, yes, on heroin, on illegal drugs. We have had a war.
That's illegal drugs.
No.
We are in the midst of the worst
heroin addiction is an illegal drug. That we have spent billions upon billions of dollars, and it's gotten worse. The heroin addiction has gotten worse. And any society that keeps doing the same thing and expect different results that's the definition of insanity. We keep spending billions of dollars on drug enforcement, and the problem gets worse because it's not a question of supply, it's a question of demand. As long as there is demand, there will be supply. I don't care how much you spend on drug enforcement, anti-drug enforcement. Yes?
Every third commercial on television is a pharmaceutical company telling that you can solve your problems by taking a pill. This is how our children are growing up. They have access to these pills. They're prescribed these pills from young children, ADD medications, Zoloft, whatever it is. My kids don't take anything, I don't even know at this point. But then the next step is heroin. Like you said, you can't get the kids start
self-medicated.
Self-medicated. So if I can't get that pill, I'll take heroin. But these kids, they see their parents taking pills, they see it on television, that it's okay to take it, and then the next step is heroin. So my question to both of you is, what are we going to do about big pharmaceutical companies? How do we fight back there? That's where we're losing.
Who's the gentleman who has a question?
Timo?
As far as heroin and what's that other? any kind of drugs, I don't think that the education gets to the kids, because I was his son 15 years ago, and he was on drugs for 18 years. And it's, first of all, it's a sickness. Besides being so addictive, I don't believe that the education was really pumped into the kids. In the schools, they should have a class every day for the kids just on drugs itself, showing how bad it is. You know, it fries your brain.
Can I just ask a question? I look at the lady in the back about the drug companies. If demographics. Now we're talking about teenagers. Now I don't know too many teenagers who tune into the CBS Evening News or NBC Nightly News or ABC World News Tonight, because when you tune into those, every commercial is for erectile dysfunction, for all of the other. It's driven by demographics. It's an older audience. So those drug ads are tailored to that older audience. I don't watch MTV, but if any of you do watch it, I know Pat Bianconello is a big fan of MTV, but if you watch MTV, how many of those drug ads do you see on the shows that the kids are watching? I don't think you'll see any on MTV or any of those shows. I'm just thinking out loud here.
The situation is that their parents are getting these drugs.
Correct.
So when a kid walks into their parents' cabinet or their friends and see these prescription pills, they think, wow, this is okay. It's prescribed by a doctor. It's okay. That's a misconception that we have.
And they can steal 2 or 3 out of the bottle. Mom and Dad don't even notice.
That's what parents need. All police stations have a drop-off box. If it's in your house and you don't need them, get rid of them.
You know what, I don't watch those shows. I don't watch those shows you mentioned. I watch shows with my kids.
This gentleman's
And
put his hand up a couple of
I'm
times.
not watching children's shows.
Right.
You know, I have young teens. But I'm watching television with my children.
Okay.
And I'm seeing those ads.
So, if I may for just 1 second. So first of all, I don't support big business, okay? I definitely think that no matter who the advertisements or the commercials or whatever are going for, I think they're wrong. I think that they're doing what they're paid to do, and that's market their product. But on the whole, I don't agree with big business. With that, we have this talk, Debbie brings up the point about, children going into their parents or even their grandparents' medicine cabinets, and that leads me to my next point. One of the things that I would like to do, if elected, is sponsor a Shed the Meds program, which is where people actually have a place to go in the community where they can do a safe disposal of pharmaceutical drugs. And what you do is, it's good for the community. You can work with the fire department or an EMS agency. You bring people in, and what you do is you work with a police department official, or you work with the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department has already tried doing this around the county. It's one of the things that I was actually responsible for bringing in when Suffolk County Legislator Bill Lindsay III was first elected. And it's something where people have a place to go where they're not just flushing it down the toilet and putting it into our drinking water. I think that's.
Do we already have a program like that?
Yes, we do. But
Public safety will take.
But it's a question of actually getting a legislator to come forward and encourage those folks to kind of come into the community and partner with them. That's kind of our job, is to support the cause.
The DEA has...
Gentlemen, wait.
Yeah.
Gotta give somebody else a chance. Gentleman in the plaid shirt.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I've been in Commack for about 45 years, and I've never seen, it really never dawned on me. A few years back, they were talking about a drug epidemic in Smithtown, so I really didn't pay attention. I lived near a convenience store. This doesn't require an answer, just make a mistake. Walked over there, and I find the needles right in the parking lot, on my lawn, in little glassine envelopes with all the pretty little pictures. Hasn't been like that for maybe a year and a half, 2 years now, but it was going on quite a bit. My daughter's 43, got 2 grandchildren. She watches over them faithfully. She said to them, how easy is it to get drugs? This is outside the school district. They said, Ma, if you ask the right kid, you can get anything you want. Right to school, they'll deliver it right to your room. That's pretty sad.
Gentleman back there?
It's off the subject, but not that that's not an important subject, because that's certainly probably the most important thing you guys are discussing here now is the heroin epidemic.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, Gary Jacobs from Smithtown. My question is, would both or either of you support bills to overhaul the family law system? Right now, the divorce rate over 50% impacts a lot of people. With things specifically like not taking away people's ability to earn a living because they fell behind on child support, but more importantly, would either one of you support presumption of shared parenting bill in the Assembly?
Jason, you want to go first this time?
Sure. I think those are, important pieces of legislation, especially because it has to do a lot with, my biggest umbrella policy in this campaign and, as a representative is to do everything I can for the home, for folks. And, I think that it's something where, if a family can kind of come to terms and raise a child and, it's about what's, best for everybody in creating an environment. And I would support it in any way that I can.
Yeah, I feel the same way, Gary. I know, we've spoken about this. It's a very complicated issue. It's a very sticky issue. There is I think of the War on the Roses every time I think of a divorce, that movie. But these divorces are never pleasant. They're often contentious, frequently nasty. The court system is not perfect. There seems to be maybe a bias in the minds of some toward the woman in the relationship, and the male is at a disadvantage. Maybe that playing field should be leveled somehow. I don't know how. Frankly, I don't know how you do it. In all honesty, it's not an issue that, frankly, in the Assembly there's a lot of attention paid to it. Quite honestly, so there has to be a awareness, I think, has to be raised about the issue because, quite frankly, it's not a front burner issue in the legislature right now. It hasn't been in the 12 years I've been there. I have been visited once or twice by people for whom this is a very important issue, but it does not rise to a critical mass where it's something we need to deal with right now. And you do have, quite frankly, I want to be very careful here, but there are some very strong feelings by...
Helene Weinstein is the biggest problem really up there, and
I don't want to go there.
I'll bring it up as
but
everybody knows that she won't let anything get passed. And I think we need people in the Assembly who are strong enough to say this needs to change, and I don't care that Helene Weinstein doesn't want it to change, and try to push those bills through because it does affect more than half the people. And if
that's right.
People here haven't gone through it, luckily, I don't wish for anybody, but their children may go through it, and to lose their whole life savings battling in court, and really I believe in New York State, we have so many attorneys that are against the change because this enriches them.
Well, you're absolutely right. The clock is ticking for the lawyers. The lawyers do very well in all of this. We don't have the opportunity to do a discharge petition, for example. If you have more than 76 sponsors of the bill, where, like you have in Congress, where we could bring that bill to the floor. We don't have that in the New York State legislature. We need it. We need it. So I do support a level playing field in the area of family law. So it's only fair, and for one side to have an advantage in the system over the other is not right, but it will be a tough fight.
I thank both of you for agreeing to support it. I think especially in New York State, where we're trying to be the leader in equality, whether it's equal pay for equal work or racism, we've always been sort of a leader in gay rights, and this is just another something that there should be equality, I believe, in the judicial system. So,
Gentlemen,
Jim Tees from Commack. I mean, this is all a great point, but I mean, you are aware, when you talk about respecting life and regarding the best interests of the family, that current New York State law talks about the best interests of the child, all over marriage. And it is a concern to many of us who have gone through divorce, where the best interests of the child destroys the interests of the family. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to follow up on it, but it's a serious issue, as Gary has said.
Well, I think Fitzpatrick kind of talked about it, and so did Gary, just about in terms of, both parents having kind of that equal opportunity to be involved in their child's life. I think that's important, and I don't want to lean in any sort of way would allude to somebody having a disadvantage, both in the law or outside of it.
And again, I don't want to make it, it's not the father against the mother, but it's the idea that the legal system is the best interest of the child, not the family.
Right.
And that skews the system in a very serious way that I don't think is going to happen. So I think you've both spoken to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
There's a possibility that those two issues of divorce and heroin are very interconnected.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you've lost that male in the household, like it or not. I've been a mother 4 times, but when the father opens his mouth, it has a special sound to it. And maybe that's part of what's happened to our society. Because we've had this rise in the divorce rate, and we've also had the rise in the heroin abuse. And it's not to, put any extra pressure on anybody that's divorced, but I think those 2 parents, and one of my children is divorced, and it does put pressure on both parties. So maybe the state can come up with a big, a fix of some sort that will help in the ultimate picture.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I was watching 60 Minutes Sunday, and they had a big expose on fraudulent tax returns where somebody steals your social security number and files a tax return using your name and social security number before you actually file yours, and they basically mess up your life by getting your tax return, and then you can't get it and you have to fight to get it. And then what about the state level? We file a state income tax and return, and do you know if there's any legislation or anything out there to protect the citizens of New York from that happening on a state level?
Interesting question. It is something that we can certainly look into, because I know the Division of Tax and Finance, of course, I'm sure they saw that 60 Minutes piece. I'm sure they're aware of it. It's not an issue that has been brought to our attention. Identity theft obviously is a concern for everyone, but if it's happening, if what we both saw on 60 Minutes Sunday is happening in New York State, it has not been brought to our attention. Whether they're managing it well, I'm not sure. Whether it seems to be focused on the IRS and the federal level. It's probably, I would think, the IRS is a huge bureaucracy. They've been spending too much of their time harassing conservative-oriented groups rather than focusing on this issue, quite frankly. And that's, I think, a real issue. That's a scandal that, frankly, if our side of the aisle were involved in, would be a front-page story every single day. But if it's a problem in New York State.
A couple of quick points. So, obviously, I agree. Obviously, identity theft is a really important point. We need to be working with all the different departments in the state and how we can, work with government to make it a little bit more efficient and to look into all these cases. But I would also take it a step farther into looking at, out of your state income tax, Long Island taxpayers lose $5 billion a year. So I'd like to know where that money's going. Let's look at, the waste, fraud, and abuse from Medicaid cases, or just from all the, waste, fraud, and abuse that's being spent in the state legislature, and how we can protect the residents. That's the most important thing that we have to do as representatives.
I've got one question for both of you, if everybody else is finished.
No.
Yes.
My name is Pamela Verity, and I run a Facebook site called United Commack for the Love of Learning. Dr. Donald James, the superintendent of our schools, has publicly said at Senate hearings and Assembly hearings that Common Core is the dumbing down of our children. They're working very hard in our district to eliminate testing on all levels in the school. And I'd like to know what you plan on doing or what you're doing to help restore our standards, because our standards are much higher than Common Core, and what you're doing to help eliminate the testing that's stressing out our children and our teachers and putting a tremendous stress on taxpayers. because Common Core and its associated tests cost a tremendous amount of money. And I have 200 pages from the school of invoices that I need to go through. That, I mean, thousands upon millions in our district.
So, if I may, I'd like to go first on the issue. You know, I understand that there is a need, obviously, for, you know, standards in education, but where I draw the line is in terms of open testing. You know, I'm a certified teacher, and when you look at, you know, the Common Core, the way it's been implemented, when it's rushed and the teachers don't have the resources, I think it's difficult because the kids are being burdened in the classroom, they're coming home, and it's also kind of been reflected, you know, on the parents. The parents are struggling with that burden. And one of the things that, you know, one of the biggest questions I have for my opponent is, from what my records tell me, is he's the only one in the state assembly who voted no to banning high-stakes standardized tests for kindergartners through second grade. And that's something that, you know, I think that over the course of the next 42 days,
We're going to find out.
And I knew he was going to ask that question, and here's the answer. Because what the legislature did is something that I think is potentially very dangerous. And that is the legislature injected itself into education policy, which is the exclusive purview of the New York State Regents. Now, I'm not a fan of the over-testing. I think, you know, there is a lot of money to be made. Common Core it's become a big problem. But the reason for it, you know, this was a bipartisan effort through the National Governors Association. The problem goes back to a study done called, what was it, A Nation at Risk, back in the 80s, that first identified problems in our public education system. No Child Left Behind was an attempt to address that. So now Common Core comes along. We're in a global economy. We are struggling as a nation in producing engineers and people who can work in this environment. So there's an effort to try and raise those standards. I think everybody, in fact, through this entire controversy, there's one piece of unanimity. Everybody believes in the higher standards. I've yet to hear anybody say, I'm not for the higher standards.
There's no research. There is no proof that these are higher standards. None. I would be happy to hear why you think these are higher standards. The New York Regents was in the process of creating standards for this state. Really high standards created by educators. And they were scrapped in the middle to get that race to the top funds, and they went to Common Core.
You're absolutely right, and that's the problem with Common Core, is that the feds dangle that money out in front of you, and the districts will tell you they got, frankly, peanuts. You got nothing, all right? We are 50 sovereign states, and the problem with the federal government is the federal government, just like, you know, big utilities will take away the freedom to set your own thermometer, the federal government will restrict your state's freedom to educate its children as it sees fit. New York has always, when you think about the economy that we have created here in the United States, where we lead the entire world, the wealthiest economy, look at the education system that created this. 50 sovereign states setting education policy for their own state's students, okay? Now we have a wonderful and excellent state university system, the largest in the United States. We have 2 Ivy League institutions. We have colleges. We have elite high schools.
We don't need Common Core.
We don't. You're right. You're right. New York State, quite frankly, doesn't.
And we're spending billions on it.
Right.
Why?
Who's the teacher?
I'm not.
Why?
But I'm.
You just answered my question, yet
Right.
why? Why are we spending billions on
If this were
something
a
we don't
congressional
need?
race, I guess it was done in Washington. It's not done in Albany. Unfortunately, Albany basically said, we'll take the money and we'll have to, you know, and we'll implement it. The implementation has been terrible.
Not just the implementation. It's the standards themselves are terrible.
It's, you know, one of the areas where I do agree is that it shouldn't be the federal government or even, you know, non-professionals or, you know, people up in Albany, you know, regulating this, you know, what's going on with the individual school districts. I think that's really important. You know, the state legislature has thrown around terms like the gap elimination adjustment, where the governor tried to close the budget deficit on. That was wrong. One of the biggest challenges that I think we have here on Long Island is that we educate 17% of the student population, and we're only going up, we're only getting 12% in state aid. And, in terms of the Common Core, I have completely been a supporter of stop it and let's move on and let's look for something else. Because you know something? I graduated from this school district. I did just fine. I did my undergraduate degree at Hofstra. I did my master's at Stony Brook. I'm a certified teacher. And you know what? You have to look at this and say, sometimes, you know what, government's wrong. You have to scrap it. You have to start over. And I will come out 100% in favor of that every single day from now until election day and into all the next session.
Any other questions? I was just wondering if the state legislature would take up the problem of nobody wants to pay more taxes, and the 2% tax cap on the school districts will slowly erode away the ability of the school districts to do their job. And if we have a problem with heroin that's so terrible, if the state legislature would take funds from somewhere else and fund special programs in the school district that don't have to come out of school district funds. In other words, at the same time you are capping the funds and saying, you can't raise it more than 2%, and of course the limit goes up more than 2%, we're in trouble. And yet we have this tremendous heroin problem. Where do the resources come from? Well, they have to come from the education of the children. They have to come from the teachers, from the instructional program. What's going to happen?
Well, the simple answer is none of us knows just yet. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the instructional program. I'm a firm believer that if the state is going to pass a mandate, it should provide the dollars to do so. I've always believed that. I am a supporter of the 2% tax cap, and more strongly supported now than ever before, because what we have to do, Bruce, the governor did not follow through on his promise when he passed the tax cap. All right? He believes he did, but he's wrong. When he passed the tax cap, he makes it a priority. And he also says, because all the school districts, all the municipalities, even his hand-picked co-chairwoman of the State Democratic Party, Stephanie Minor, the mayor of Syracuse, said, you have to do something about mandates, the unfunded mandates. So he creates a commission. It's done absolutely nothing. We can provide that money if we can just give relief. If we can give relief to all of our municipalities through these unfunded mandates. I have a bill that I have put in, A8603. Does three simple things. It puts a 2% hard cap on binding arbitration. All right? Mm-hmm. 2, new hires would go into the defined contribution program operated by TIAA PREF that is utilized by 70% of our instructional staff at the state university. Okay? 3, it would modify, not repeal, but modify the Triborough amendment of the Taylor Law in one respect, that when a contract expires, and for those of you who don't know what the Taylor, or rather the Triborough amendment is, it mandates that all provisions of a contract, an agreement, a public employee contract, remain in full effect until a new agreement is ratified. I propose changing it in one respect, that the automatic step increases that are in these contracts cease for the length of time that there is no contract, to bring the parties back together. Because I have been told by more than one school superintendent that they have been told by their teachers' union representative, we're in no hurry to get to the table, we have tried it. None of these provisions takes anything away from cops, teachers, public employees. But it does, it is an attempt to slow down the growth of these contracts, because it's our labor costs, salaries, pensions, and benefits, health benefits, that are driving up our property taxes. And we have to get those under control. Now, I said before, I mentioned that quote by Aristotle, no laws, written ought never remain unaltered. We can change these things. They're not written in stone. We live in a different world today, and we have to adapt to these new realities. One of my colleagues, a Democrat and a professor at one of our SUNY campuses, came up to me and said, we need to talk about your proposal on the defined contribution. Because he said to me, the best advice I got when I was a young teacher, probably not much older than Jason here, because I didn't know anything about defined benefit or defined contribution, but the lady at Human Resources said, go into the defined contribution program, it's a better option. And he says, I now have over $1 million in that account. It works, and we need to have a conversation with him. Now that's from a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, right? So we need to change. It doesn't take anything away from anybody currently in the system, but we need to change going forward. We are now using the governor, who just passed, and sadly so, but a referendum last year to expand gambling. And the polling was going against it. You know what the governor did? Governor Cuomo picked up the phone, called the Board of Elections, and said, change the wording of this referendum to say it's going to lower property taxes and create jobs. And after he did that, and they polled it, all of a sudden, a slight majority was in favor of it. So that's how desperate people are for tax relief. And it won. And sadly, you know what they did in that referendum? Because either way, win or lose, we still lose, I believe, in Suffolk County and Nassau County. Because what they did in the language is, either way, win or lose, Suffolk and Nassau counties both get 1,000 video lottery terminals, better known as video crack, ladies and gentlemen. I don't believe using vice to lower property taxes is the right way to go. And when they did the press conference, they brought out the heads of OTB who said, geez, at $3,000 a day per machine, umpteen dollars, we can help lower property taxes, help our government. Baloney. It's there to prop up the bloated patronage system in both of these counties, exploited by both Democrats and Republicans. Nonsense. All right? Have you noticed the difference in your property tax bill after they installed all the solar panels on all the county properties? No, I haven't noticed the difference. All right? Our costs are going up faster than our ability to keep up with them. Right now, the state passed two bills allowing municipalities, school districts, the state, counties, towns to borrow to pay their pension costs over 10 years. There's almost $3.5 billion borrowed now. That is the classic case of kicking the can down the road. And God help us if we go through another market downturn and we're that much deeper in the hole. Jason worked for Bill Lindsay, the late Bill Lindsay, a good guy, a friend of mine. We ended up having a very interesting row, if you will, in front of the Suffolk PTA, regional PTA. You were there. And Mr. Lindsay circulated a letter to the county legislators saying that in the world of pensions, you're really solvent, only solvent if you meet 100%, if you have 100% of the assets to meet your obligations. If you're below 80% or at 80% or better, you're considered to be in the safe zone. I personally don't believe that. If you're not at 100%, you're not safe. But we went down to like 80-some-odd% after the downturn. So Mr. Lindsay circulates a letter to the legislators, I think 16 of the 18 signed it, saying that if 80% of your funding level is considered safe, then why can't we just make 80% of the contribution that we're required to make? And you were there, Jason, Bill and I had a pretty spirited conversation. You are digging yourself into a much deeper hole by doing that and putting an incredible burden on future taxpayers, or current taxpayers on that. I know what I have proposed is somewhat controversial. In fact, I was visited by 4 members of the PBA after I put my bill in because they don't like the 2% hard tax. And you get 4 big burly police officers. No, sorry. Okay. And they're great guys. I knew one of them very well. He's an old friend. But we'd like to talk. They have no appointment. They just come into the office. We were called to session. I had to get going. Guys, my pleasure. Come on in. What do you want to talk about? Well, your bill. What do you want to talk about? Well, we'd like you to pull it. Why? We don't like the 2%. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, you guys, for the superior officers and the detectives, you just inked a deal with county executive below, all right, out to 2018. 82% of your members are in the highest rung. And by the time the end of this agreement, it'll probably be higher. And I said, my bill doesn't mean you can't negotiate a 3% deal or a 4 or 5% deal. But you and I both know you're going to have to put more on the table to get it. See, the unions love collective bargaining. They just don't want to use it. Because they don't want to have to put anything on the table because they want to come and get it out of the legislators and bypass the collective bargaining process. And I said, look, let's pretend for a moment. My bill is law. It's 2019. The agreement expires. You can't come to an agreement, and we're going to implement the 2% cap. Now, you know what the highest paid officer is going to be making in that agreement? $227,000. Now, I ask you, 2% on $227,000, who's getting hurt here? Let's think of the taxpayers, because there's no more elasticity in the property taxpayer of Long Island, ladies and gentlemen, and that has to stop. Going into a defined contribution, it lowers the cost to taxpayers, lowers the cost to these municipalities, and it'll be a higher contribution than, it'll be a slightly less contribution from the employer, but it'll be a generous contribution, and it works. Now, if 70% of your SUNY professors use it, and these are not stupid people, they're college professors, then it's good enough for K-12, it's good enough for Jason, it's good enough for, although you're not working right now. You said you're not.
I left my job to do this full time.
All right. So, but if you have the opportunity to do as well as my Democratic colleague who, made that choice to go into the TIAA prep. We have to provide relief for our taxpayers. And the modification of Triborough. It doesn't take anything away. But when the union says we're in no rush to get to the table, we have Triborough, it reminds me of the famous line, the quote by Albert Shanker, the old UFT president, United Federation of Teachers of the city back in the 60s. And he said, when students pay union dues, that's when I fight for their interests. Well, I'm there to fight for my taxpayers' interests. I love teachers, I love cops, I have cops in my family. We're no longer with us, unfortunately, but I respect what they do. But no one, ladies and gentlemen, is entitled to a blank check. Everything has to be paid for. And when we are now using cash register justice by putting speed cameras in front of our schools, when there is no crisis of speeding in our schools, when we are expanding the use of red light cameras, we are expanding gambling opportunities, and we are so, even if you're in favor of it, we are so late to the game. Atlantic City is closing 4 casinos. The newest casino, a $2 billion facility, is closing. It's not even open. Even Donald Trump is closing down his casino in Atlantic City. We're so late to this game. It's a fool's, you're naive to think that we are going to lower property taxes using gambling revenue. It's just not there.
Jason, just final word tonight. Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, there have been a couple of references to young people that are like me. Being young does not identify who I am as a candidate. It does not identify me as someone who's in the community. It doesn't identify me as somebody who was in the workplace and young. I left my job, plain and simple, because in order to care enough about this campaign to 100% and to actually do what is best for our community, I made that tough decision. I left a $50,000 a year job. I left those benefits that Mr. Fitzpatrick is talking about, but please do not be mistaken that my age does not define who I am. Second of all, I'm a little troubled by this conversation because we just went into about a 15-minute discussion about pensions, but the question, folks, had to do with heroin, right? I mean, that's where the whole discussion that Ruth started had to talk about with heroin and education and how we're going to handle it in the school setting, which has nothing to do with the pensions or what the teachers or public employees are going to make. And I think we need to stay focused because, yet, that is an issue that we're going to be discussing over the next 42 days. But here, we have a question about heroin in schools. And I think that's something that's really important to focus on because we need subject matter experts, we need teachers, we need people. And yes, my answer to you is that if we had to reallocate some of the monies to invest into our future, I would support it 100%. As long as we were not losing another vital service, I would absolutely support it, because it is something that is troubling every part of our community. Not just the people who are actually taking it, but the families who are suffering, the grandparents, the educators. I was at a function that was being held for me on September 12th, and they lost one of their old students to heroin while we were sitting there and talking about the campaign. And right off the bat, I said, this evening is over, because they then had to go and talk to the family. It was a Friday night. The school day doesn't just end at 2:30 or 3 or 3:15 or 3:30. This is a problem that is troubling our community, and it is something that needs 24 hours of attention. In the school day, after the school day, and on weekends. And I will not give up on my commitment to that cause and to every aspect of bringing money home and to, putting it in the right fields and educating people. I will never unwaver on my commitment.
Thank you to both our candidates. We'll take a 5-minute break for coffee, and then we'll come back and take care of business.
Oh, really?
Membership cards.
Are you reading up time? That's good.
I know, ladies. Okay. Next item on our agenda, I'm going to hold off on the Smithtown recycling program changes because Wendy LaMountain isn't here, and she's the one who brought that up. It seems that Smithtown is considering going to single stream recycling, which means you put out both the paper and the plastic and the metal in the same container, and it gets separated. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but that's one of the considerations, and she wanted to bring it up and talk about it, but she couldn't make it tonight. So we'll hold that off. Rachel?
We used to have an article voted in, so it's now.
It already is? For Smithtown?
New procedure.
For Smithtown?
Yes.
I believe that you put the paper in one container, and the other stuff in the other. One truck comes and picks the paper in one bin, and the other stuff in the other.
That's what they do in Nassau County.
They're doing the
That's what they do in
One truck.
Nassau County.
Yeah, she talked about a chip in the bin which you get then credit for. In other words, if you get it, the bin costs like $50. They put a chip in it, and when you recycle, you get credit for what you're recycling, and therefore you get back the money. But I don't know the particulars of it, so I'm going to wait until she's here. John?
You make back more than $50.
I don't know. I said I don't know the particulars, but I know that's what she was talking about, and I'd rather have her here, because that's her area of expertise. She's in that business. Marion Call Farm Preservation, the trial is set for oral arguments on October 23rd, right?
Yes, it was adjourned.
Right. It's supposed to be in September, but it was adjourned to October 23rd. I plan to go to the court or to the judge's chambers to hear the oral arguments on that date. If anybody wants to join me, let me know. It's out in Riverhead, so we won't know anything new about that until that's...
Those oral arguments provided by attorneys?
Yes, the two attorneys present oral arguments.
No taxpayers?
No.
You can go there and view.
Who are they from, the attorney?
The school district and the heirs. There might be also an attorney there from the New York State Attorney General's office and the New York State Parks Department, because they are interested parties also. October 23rd. If you want to go out to Riverhead with me, I'll be happy to go with you.
Right. What court?
Judge Martin.
Supreme Court.
he used to be partners with the other fellow on, in front of the state building. Martin. I can't remember his name. He was partners with him before he became the judge. Martin.
Yeah, I don't know, hopefully not the lawyer for the school district.
Bruce, have you spoken to the senator about the farm in the past? He's familiar with the...
Is Septembert?
Yeah.
No.
I love it when you call me senator.
It's not, you're not a state
I only
senator?
correct you when you demote me.
It's not a state senator? You're not, it's not, the assemblyman is not a state senator?
I'm sorry?
State assemblyman is not a state senator?
No. Senate's the upper house, we're the lower house.
Oh, okay.
It's Flanagan.
All right. My mistake, sorry.
Mr.
Get demoted.
Mr. Patrick, you know about the Marion Call Farm?
I know a little bit about it, yes. What is it?
It's owned at this point by the school district.
Well, it was Barbara Kruger from the Rotary Club.
Right.
You know Barbara?
Yeah.
She reached out to me to talk about Marion Carl Farm and how we could save it, because I think the school district, I think in the beginning was glad to have it, and everybody had a wonderful idea to turn it into maybe a working farm, an educational institution, and quite frankly, the cost of operating that place is, it's not part of the, well, you could argue it could be part of the core mission of the school district, but their expenses are growing in other areas. So I had, what I told Barbara, I said, I have an idea, because when I was on the town council, we put together the agreement to save the Harnett Sawmill, the only working sawmill on Long Island, with a gentleman named John Baker, who is basically the mover and shaker behind PJ Venture. We also put together an agreement with John's help to save what's called the Psalm property behind the bull. That's 22 acres. So I said, I know exactly, I know who to talk to. And I reached out to John Baker. And John Baker and I and Legislator Kennedy and Don, the superintendent, Mary Jo Masiello, we had a meeting in John Kennedy's office to see if we could work something out where we could get someone to come in and either purchase it or help out. We were making some very good progress. Transfer development rights, that was part of some of this discussion. And then what happened was, and this is when my involvement stopped, I guess the heirs got involved, and then things started to get sticky from a legal standpoint. At that point, this wasn't going to work, so Kennedy and I stepped back, Baker stepped back, and it became a problem.
Baker is still involved.
Okay, good.
And they did come to an agreement to have the Suffolk County Help for Retarded Children put a school there.
Yeah.
And
Is it equestrian?
Group
Yes.
with them, and fix up the house and make it into a museum and use part of it for a park.
Mm-hmm.
And they were up to the point of sitting down to write the agreement when the heirs suit came up.
Right.
And so October 23rd, it's been going on now for a year and a half, and October 23rd is the oral arguments.
Good. Okay.
So after that, we should have some sort of judgment from the courts.
Right.
It's going to take some time after that. But
Keep our fingers crossed. It'd be great to have. So, very good.
So it sounds like you're up to speed on it. And
Well, I was heavily involved up until the point where the heirs decided to, challenge this, and we did. You're right. It was an equestrian use. It was AHRC. It was a nice. I thought it was going to solve all of our problems here and keep it a farm and keep it in active use. And there was a benefactor who wanted to get involved and be very helpful here. And I don't know if you know John Baker, but in my experience of 15 years working on the town council, I know some developers get a bad rap. But John Baker, his word is his bond, his word is gold, and he is the best guy I have ever worked with in terms of these types of issues in my years of public service. So if John Baker's involved, it'll be done right, it'll be done well, and the interest of the community will be paramount. And he just has a very good head for these types of things, and has a world of contacts
in order to make something like that happen.
He put in a tremendous number of hours
Really
meeting.
did.
He's a developer?
Yeah, he is a, I guess you'd call him the clerk of the works, if you will, maybe for PJ Venture. He handles all of their operations.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very bright guy.
John?
I was gonna say, I don't know, it's the first time I've been at the meeting over this farm. I'm curious, from what I saw on the computer, the school district was willed the property. Now, unless it's stipulated that they must use it as a school, benefit of the school, I always thought that you couldn't break a will. Unless, unless you were not right upstairs, but I mean, I don't know what the will said, but if she specifically gave it, I'm in favor of saving it. But if she specifically said it was going to the school district with no ties to it.
No, she listed 5 purposes it could be used for.
I didn't know.
So the intent was to give it to the residents
But it,
through the school district.
okay.
And there were 5 codicils to the will that said it had to be used for these 5 purposes. And the heirs came forward with a suit just as we were going to have this contract written and said they didn't live up to their part of the bargain, we want it back. And the school district, their defense was very mild, to put it the least, because it was 30 years after the fact. And they didn't defend it on the grounds of
Statute of
limitations.
Sounds like they may stand a good chance of being able to recoup that.
Well, they've now put in an amended plea on the grounds of statute of limitations. So that's why we're going to hear the oral arguments. Town Line Road truck traffic. Bob, Sabrina, and I are going to see Mr. Patron next week. No, between October 3rd and 20th, Bob is off. And he made us some promises when he came to the January meeting about Town Line Road, and nothing's been done yet. So we're going to see what can be done. We talked about New York State extra voting days. Dan, fundraising.
Well, we talked about fundraising at the last couple of meetings, and I think one of the proposals we were putting forward was some sort of a raffle, lottery raffle kind of thing. And I guess you need to take a vote to see if that's something the membership wants to do, or how you go about it.
Well, we can ask. We need some people who physically would do it. That's what you first need.
Yeah, getting it done.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to let everybody know, the library's front doors will be closing in about 8 minutes or so. So if anybody needs to go out the front door, they need to do it before we close up. Otherwise, you spend the night. No, I'm kidding. It's the rear exit door just to your left. I'll take you right out to the back.
Thank you very much.
You will.
Thank you.
We have plenty of tomatoes for the rest of the night.
I know Art was interested in doing it, and we basically we print up 1,000 tickets, raffle tickets, and distributed it among the membership, and everybody would sell whatever they could get, and then it would be tied to the lottery drawings every night. And it's just a matter of whatever protocol you have to go through to authorize it and move forward with it.
Anybody willing to join Art? Tamo?
No.
We're on the committee.
About 40 years ago, I ran a 300 plus club. And all the money went into the bank. Okay, we had a $25 a week drawing for a winner, and a $100 one. I can't remember, it's 40 years. And it was like $100 a month or something like that. And then we had a dinner dance for the 300 plus club.
You're hired.
No. And I got a batting cage for the baseball team, earphones for the football team, and Toledo scale for the wrestling team, and a scoreboard for the football team.
Well, our purpose here is to have a fund
yeah,
in case we have to hire an attorney.
as a group.
Oh,
And stamps, anything, paper, you need funds to get things done, you know what I mean? If you want to send out leaflets or whatever, you got them printed. So you need not a war chest, but you need to have some money to be able to do whatever you want to do. If you want to have a bake sale or if you want to do a farmer's market, you need to, have money to rent the property or whatever. And, you need some funding. So that we just looking for ideas for fundraising.
To sell the books, you would go on 50/50.
Well, are you willing to join that committee? Oh, come on.
Yeah.
I'll join the committee, yeah.
Good.
All right, I'm going with you guys. I'll go.
All right. Good, great. All right, we got a committee.
We got a committee. A committee of 3, but we got a committee.
I'll have Art to get in
All
touch
right,
with you
tell Art
guys.
to call me.
Membership cards. We need new membership cards for this year. They run out in 2014. Dan got them last year. How much they cost us?
$211.
$211. So we need a vote to expend that kind of money.
The only reason we get 1,000 is because the price is cheap. It's not, if you get 500, evidently it doesn't pay. You're paying close to 211, I think.
Right, the more you make, the cheaper it is.
Right.
And hopefully we'll run out of them this
You
year.
make a motion to expend money for the membership cards?
Yes, I'm going to make the motion.
Seconded by Debbie. All those in favor? Okay, providing membership cards. Any member items? Deb?
It was, gals in the back couldn't hear questions being asked of our two guests tonight.
Oh.
Because we're faced forward, most of us, and they are in the back. So one of them said they're going to look for a microphone that could be handed around when to ask the questions. And
A
oftentimes...
microphone and a loudspeaker.
Well, I'm sure that, yes. So, we've had big meetings, and sometimes the people in the back, especially, there's a lot of side conversations tonight.
Okay, portable mic and a loudspeaker. I'll see if I can get a price for that. So next time we meet, we can talk about that.
Oh, my goodness. Did you hear what she said in the back there?
Any other member items? Reverend?
I've been talking to the press quite a bit lately, and New York Times is going to publish an article this week based in part on a lengthy interview they had, telephone interview I had with them. I won't be the only source. And I called the op-ed page and asked if I could write an editorial. I said, oh no, we have other things. The foreign war is taking more space now. But if you don't like the article when it comes out, we'll reconsider. So I'm going to still try to write for them after it comes out, or at least look at what the reporter says, because, what you think you're saying and what gets reported aren't always the same thing. And I want a chance to put in a more comprehensive fashion a little bit of what I said at a clergy meeting last Friday. So I'm trying to get published both in the New York Times and Newsday. And I know the Times article is definitely in the works, so if you want to look from my point of view, start there, and then I'll see if I can get some op-ed pieces. And I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but I think I'm trying to elevate the discussion to a more rational level, and I hope that you'll look for it if it is published.
Is that regards to your proposal?
Yes, well, it started over that, but my point is about how we should discuss immigration. And I think the biggest problem we have right now is we're using improper vocabulary. And I zinged the Newsday for that Friday, and I noticed they didn't put a thing about my presentation in the article on Saturday.
What's the improper vocabulary? Are you trying to say refugee instead of...
What I said at the library, the last special meeting we had at the library, nobody's illegal. I believe that as a proposition the same way I believe Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain rights, namely life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that for these reasons governments are instituted among men. Nobody can be illegal, period. If people can be illegal, then I suggest every one of us is illegal that aren't related to American Indians. You look at the history of the U.S., is largely a history of organized theft of Indian lands for our country. And I just detest the use of the word illegal immigrants. Undocumented immigrants conveys the same information without the emotionally charged title of illegal. And we don't use the word illegal to describe criminals who commit murder, robbery, arson, and rape. That's my definition of illegal. The way this is getting discussed today is just terrible. And I think we need to elevate the terms. For example, the term to describe people whose skin is black used to start with N. Perfectly acceptable term when I was growing up in the 50s, and no longer is. And it's a good thing that it isn't, and I think that we need to elevate the discussion about immigration in the same fashion. So let's get real here, folks. Use the proper vocabulary and try to get out of this reptile response that we saw so much of at the public meeting. People weren't thinking. It's just like walking into a rattlesnake's nest. You don't give a good damn about your explanations about why you didn't mean to disturb his house. He's interested in either sinking his teeth into your legs or running away. And we've got to get away from that fight or flight reaction.
And can you tell us anything about what's come after that meeting? Anything that has happened?
Well, we're looking, we could have just told the community, too bad, nothing we suggest is illegal. But we didn't want to do that. The old saying, a person convinced against their will is a person unconvinced still. The community just isn't ready for it, as advantageous as we thought it might be. So what's happened is we're looking for alternatives, some of which were suggested and have come from other sources. We're looking at the possibility of getting private foundations to help us spruce our building up, and using it as a group of veterans I'm looking at right now that are really trying to help guys that are down, guys and girls that are down and out after leaving active duty and have all kinds of needs.
Can I ask what happened to the daycare center? Why did that become non-feasible?
They went from 120 kids to 20.
Well, why is that?
They were not licensed to do a full-day program, and that's what most people seem to want. So with 2 people working in most families.
Couldn't you just like explore that avenue of getting?
We're trying to.
Okay.
But you got to understand that the other remaining program we have, JKL Montessori, lost 5 families, 3 of which were new and 2 of which had been around for 20 years. And I said, why did your 20-year people leave? And she said, no reason, they just left. Imagine if we had done something we didn't like. We didn't even do what we were discussing. We didn't have any signed contracts. We didn't say we were committed to this.
So
we were just discussing it.
That was your tenants, you mean?
Yeah.
Those were your tenants?
We said, Mother, may we? And, and then we said, well, we need to rethink this. So why would these people who had kids there for 20 years just up and leave? Well, it showed you how unready the community was for that particular proposal, even though we thought it had merit.
And you might have merit. So you're exploring other daycare centers to?
Yeah, we're going to try to get a mommy and me program, but that's not going to take up all the space. And so the problem is universal pre-K is causing a lot of private schools to face difficulties, because if you can get pre-K in a tax-supported institution, then you don't have to pay tuition.
Well,
so
Commack School District does have pre-K that they have some sort of relationship with. We used to have with the daycare centers.
Right, we checked.
They were a certain amount to each daycare center.
Right. We did ask, and they said they didn't need our facility. They had fun.
They pulled back. I had heard that they pulled back even on pumpkin patch, which they've had for years. The school district used to offload kids down there, and they pulled back on them. So, they're doing it, I guess, to school places or nurseries that are more favorable to them.
What I had heard, or the rumor I had heard, was that they were not giving out whatever their quotas to private things, I'll say private for lack of a better term, like your church, and they were giving preferential treatment to the daycare centers that were renting the schools, the surplus schools.
Well, it's
Kind
their
of
program.
give it to our people first before we give it to the
They
outside.
can allocate their money the way you can't give them any orders.
Maybe the community needs to stand behind, like your facility, and say that we want our kids to go to your facility if you can get the full day deal. I know that's a big thing for people. I know Pumpkin Patch offered full day, and the school would offer half-day pre-K, so the people would pay for half, and the school district would pay for the other half, you know what I mean?
Well, Joanne is trying to pick up some of the 20 that would have been going if they'd stayed open and do half-day care. She's licensed to do half-day and full-day, and she's trying to get more full-day students. State came in and told her what the number was that she could do. So we're working, but it's, you know, it's slow.
There were a number of women who voiced their
Willingness to help?
That's correct. Their willingness to help. And I'm wondering
Did they come forward?
Exactly.
One was a drug, a lady who counseled people.
At the end of the meeting,
She was
have they come
sitting-
forward to give you a hand?
A couple of women have, Debbie Virga.
Right, she was here.
But there were other women at that meeting who said that they would be happy to help you look for either funding or grants or something.
Ellis Binger was another one.
Say again, please.
Ellis Binger.
And did she come forward after the meeting? And
I've talked to her, yeah.
oh, good.
So
Has she
between
checked-
her and Debbie, they know our tax exempt numbers, so apparently that's, foundation money is available for tax exempt organizations, so.
Has your church ever looked into becoming a civic center? It's the one thing we really lack terribly in this town. And, you know, whether or not.
What about the one on Jericho, the Civic Center?
Which one?
We had that hearing on the shopping center restaurant.
All the way in Smithtown?
I mean, town,
Senior center.
Senior center.
We had a senior citizen residence at Met.
that's in Smithtown. That's
There's nothing
that's
in
not
Commack.
Commack.
We
Oh,
want something a little closer.
Commack.
That's why we want the farm, we'll make it a civic
I-
center.
right.
I've always
Reverend, you
thought,
had mentioned veterans. Tomorrow at the Veterans Home in Northport, they're having a stand down. There are going to be 58 different agencies to help homeless veterans and their family. You're going to come down there and just see how it works, maybe get a leg up on it.
Where's this going to be now?
At the hospital, Veterans
The
Hospital.
hospital?
The Northport?
Yeah. Just follow signs for stand down.
I know where it is.
It's going to be in the gymnasium.
All right.
Get ready with that.
And
9 to 2 tomorrow.
2.
Any other member items?
Also getting new members. Can we get a flyer out that we could send over the internet to, you know, to recruit new members? Maybe
Who should we send it to?
to our members to then run off on their printer and then, you know, canvass
Oh,
their
okay.
area.
Sure.
Well, we did that Halloween. You think we'd have any more luck giving out the flyers on Halloween and the kids' fairs?
I don't know.
We did that once.
We could do both.
Yeah.
I think we had a money out of it.
Right, but
I sent a general email to all the members that we have that are on email.
Did somebody get Zove to sign
But I
up?
haven't been inundated yet.
Anybody get him?
I said at that first meeting.
You signed up?
Well, we got membership forms here.
We got membership, there you go.
Before we leave, can we ask the officer to talk about this arrest that was made, this car?
Sure.
Is it a car theft, right? I think this guy was.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if I go into too much detail on that,
Okay.
it's still being
Yeah, no.
investigated. I was actually in court this morning when those two illegal criminals were arrested and arraigned.
Was this the one that happened yesterday?
So one that happened yesterday. Two of our officers had worked with an informant and they were stopping the vehicle in, was it in Greenlawn? And the driver got spooked, he has a long criminal history, and he took off and he hit the officer. And
I just saw that news right now.
Yeah, the mirror of the car hit him in the head and knocked him to the ground.
What
So-
it was.
He's in the hospital now, in a medically induced coma with bleeding on the brain. They had to rush him into emergency surgery today because the hematoma was continuing to bleed. So I would pose a rhetorical question like, what salary is that worth? I certainly couldn't put a number on that. And it happens, thankfully not to me, thankfully not to most officers. But in any case, it happens. And these two guys took off. They carjacked a woman, elderly woman in, on Dovecote, it was, right, Commack Road. They ripped her, the one guy ripped her out of the car, threw her to the ground, stole her car, and then headed over to Target in Central Islip. And we're not exactly sure, maybe not at liberty to give too much details as to why they did that, but apparently they used her credit card too. So there was no shame in the fact they were just trying to get away. They were just continuing their criminal spree. So these things happen, but the tie, and it was brought up earlier, was